There's something very strange going on at the Funskate Skating Rink. There was only one rule at my job. Never, at any point, let the music stop playing. I work at the Funskate Skating Rink off of I-35. You know, that old building with an electric fence and barbed wire around it. It wasn't always that way. Up until a few weeks ago, it used to be full of life. We were packed with skaters, hosted birthday parties, ladies' nights. Now it's filled with something else entirely. I always hated going into the basement at work. No part of me wanted to climb down several flights of stairs and then a ladder, whose rungs that always seemed wet seemed to be dripping with something dark and pungent, despite there being no clear source for the viscous liquid. I'm still not exactly sure what the massive metal-lined, matte black painted room had been used for back before the owners bought the land above it and built the skating rink. Unfortunately for me, the basement housed the manager's office. I always tried to find reasons to avoid being down there, but my assistant manager, Delaney, had mentioned that she'd seen Preston, the new guy, trying to break into the AV room when he thought no one was looking. I needed to watch the tapes to verify. He'd been talking about his band from the moment we'd hired him, so she guessed he was trying to play something of theirs over the speaker, self-promote. So much as even attempting to mess with the music was a fireable offense. Instant termination. The owners were generally reasonable people. The only rule that I ever found questionable was to always keep the same playlist, the best of the 80s, Friday Night Hits edition, going on repeat at all times. It didn't matter if the rink was closed. It didn't matter if we lost power and had to rely on the backup generator in order to do so. That specific combination of songs was always supposed to be playing. It was even blasted through the manager's office, too, for good measure. I grew up in the 80s and had never heard a single one of those songs before my time at Funskate. If you listened closely enough, the melodies sounded almost familiar, but the words were meaningless nonsense. But the military-esque bunker and need to keep the playlist going were just some of the many things I had learned not to question during my 5-year tenure as general manager. We were required to keep the door to the AV room locked, and only Delaney and I had copies of the key. A few months ago, when I was off duty, there was an incident where the power went out. It was the first time that it had happened during business hours. In the seconds it took for the backup generator to start up, something happened that shook my employees and our customers up so badly that those willing to even talk to me about it wouldn't meet my eyes. They'd just mumble about something not right. Delaney, who had been on duty at the time, was so disturbed by whatever she'd seen that she refused to speak. I insisted that she took the rest of the week off. Unlike the basement, the rest of the building itself was a mess. After particularly heavy rains, water would seep in and settle in the corners, and that wet rot smell never left. There were spots that made me wonder if they had truly cleared out all of the asbestos. They'd renovated it back in the 80s, but had made no effort to update it since. Stains and snags marred the swirling, disorienting patterns of the neon carpet, wall to wall, floor to ceiling. Working there felt like being sealed into a box of cringy lime greens and orange pinks. The owners were just lucky that neglect could be mistaken for nostalgia. We always had more than enough business despite the conditions. It probably didn't hurt that we were the only skating rink in the county. As I sat down in the nearly soundproof basement and watched the security videos, I eventually saw Preston's grainy form doing exactly as Delaney described, lurking in the shadows, waiting until everyone cleared out before trying the door. I sighed, trying to prepare myself for an uncomfortable conversation. As I headed back upstairs, I just could make out music, but it wasn't our usual playlist. It was rough. Too much feedback. There wasn't enough bass, the guitar too loud, and the voice crudely layered on top of it all was clearly Preston's. At first, I thought the violent, loud humming was a part of his song, until it overwhelmed it and then drowned everything else out. It was awful. Something I could feel not just in my eardrums, but in my eyes too. For a brief moment, it felt like the building shifted. Everything seemed to move sideways. I swore I could taste colors and sounds. All my senses overlapped, and for a brief moment the entire world felt out of sync. And then an overwhelming sense of pure joy took over. I felt it in my throat, tight, like the air was being pulled from my lungs, the moisture from my eyes. I knew I needed to get back upstairs. I needed it more than I'd ever needed anything in my entire life. I frantically made my way towards the stairs, took the steep steps 2 at a time. And then, as I was ascending the ladder, as quickly as the sensation had come, the world returned to normal. At the top of the stairs, I heard the soft sound of the usual playlist start back up. He must have just added his song to it, and the usual tunes had resumed after his had ended. That wave of desperate happiness was gone, replaced by overwhelming dread. From the moment I threw open the door to the main entry, before I could see anything, I already knew that something was very wrong. The smell hit me like a wall. It was as if something had been burning for a very long time. Despite the lack of smoke, I could taste it, could feel the acrid sharpness of char at the back of my throat. I panicked, wondering what on God's green earth had happened, what I'd find myself walking into. It took me a moment to realize that something was missing. The laughter, general wave of chattering that came from a rink packed with people on a Saturday afternoon. The lights were still going and the music was playing, echoing across the smooth wood of the rink. But it was abandoned. Well, empty of people, at least. In the distance, I could see crumpled forms, encircling a portion of the rink. When I called out for someone, anyone, it went unanswered. I passed by the AV room, the door ajar, onto the rink where I'd realized what I'd been seeing were piles of clothes and skates, forming a nearly perfect circle around a section of worn and newly warped wood in the middle. There was a reverence about it, as if everyone that had been up there while I was in the basement had gathered around and bore witness to something incredible, fascinating, terrible. Encircling it, I could see Preston's sneakers next to Delaney's blinged out inlines. The people, every single sign of human life, gone. I was so focused on the only worldly remains of my employees and our customers that it took me a moment to notice that the wood in the center looked scorched, soft, like it had bubbled up. A few of the skates had been pushed aside, breaking the circle as if to let something through. A thin layer of a dark and streaky stain led away from the center and onto the swirling, hypnotic patterns of the neon carpet. As I cautiously approached the center, the music changed again, back to what sounded like a different song from Preston's band. The buzz of the black lights overhead became overwhelming, before they too were drowned out by the now familiar humming. The wood of the rink was encircled by the skates. It rippled, moved as if there was something writhing underneath it. The smell, which from up close was that of burning plastic mixed with something more organic, returned. Something needed me to come just a bit closer. Something itching to come out that I would finally see. As I approached, to match my elation, I felt a grin forming, one so wide it hurt. And then the interloping song ended, and a meaningless, unintelligible one from the best of the 80s Friday Night Hits edition echoed out. The hum, feeling, that burning smell were all gone. I took that as my cue to get the hell out of there before the music switched again, and ran past the rental booth, now dark. I tried to ignore the sickening, squelching sound of something that moved along the linoleum within. I'm not sure how I knew it, but I could feel that if I looked in there, I'd see something I was never meant to see. Something that would break me. I wasn't sure what else to do once I stepped back into the sunlight outside, so I called the police. It took them forever to show up, and once they came, I walked them through everything that I knew, and watched them share a look. I figured that they just thought I was crazy. I handed over the tapes per their request. The owners called me that night, reminding me that despite the small incident that occurred, I was expected to report to work the next day. After sitting in my car before my next shift, fighting a wave of anxiety at the thought of going back inside, I was shocked to see an entirely new staff when I walked in. They were all faces I'd never seen before. They worked wordlessly, acted as if nothing was wrong. Funskate never sits empty now, despite being closed to the public. After I clock out, the new employees all remain, only their eyes moving to watch me leave, still blocking the door to the AV room. Something about them unnerves me, so I try not to stare at them too closely, but I'm fairly certain that they are armed. I went down to talk to the police the next day, but they claimed they didn't send anyone out there that night. They casually implied that nothing occurred there at all. Delaney, Preston, all those missing people from around town. No one else seems to even remember them. Sometimes, as I desperately broach that subject in conversation with someone, I'll see a brief flash of recognition behind their eyes before it's gone just as quickly. I've been struggling just to find someone here that will even believe me. I just want to know what happened that night. And that was There's Something Very Strange Going On at the Funskate Skating Rink by JamFranz. I love it. I love this story, and for many reasons. So number one is it takes place at a skating rink. It reminds me of my youth. Levels of nostalgia going on there. I've been at places like this, the funky carpet, the really samey kind of music going on all the time. You've only got like a basic rink in the middle and stuff. It's basic, but I mean, it just resonates something within me, and that's what drew me to it. Besides the fact that there's something strange going on there, obviously that drew me to it too. But I was like, oh, okay, different atmosphere, different setting. Yeah, it kind of resonates with me in a way, and I'm like, that's great. I want to know what this story is, and I'm so glad I did because this story is awesome. So we have a skating rink which is built in a kind of strange way. It's got some really strange rooms to it that are a little bit maybe more intensely made than a typical kind of a building. And then, like our main character was talking about, it's almost like there's a military-esque design to a level of it, with like the weird manager's office area being like a crazy metal-lined matte black kind of a room and stuff like that. So it makes me wonder initially if before it became a skating rink, if maybe it was some kind of a military testing bunker of some kind. Maybe not of weaponry, but maybe of perhaps things not understood, entities and stuff like that. Maybe kind of like an SCP vibe, if you know what I mean. Now, I'm not saying it is SCP, but you know what? There could very well be an SCP that relates to this, which would be very interesting, and I'd be very curious to find out. But so obviously you got the weird stuff going on. It's got a weird set of rules that have to be followed, which then everything is fine. Which then makes me think of the game Control, which is yet another aspect of that, where there's specific things that have to be done in order to make sure that everything is okay and that the building doesn't shift and do what it wants to do. Similar kind of stuff. And so I think where it gets really interesting, obviously, is the fact that when the music does change, we're finally now exposed to something super different, But it's not immediately obviously different. But it clearly happened long enough that something devastating happened. The fact that, I mean, so you got the circle of people in the middle of the rink, or somewhere in the rink, who just completely vanished. But their clothes, their skates, everything else tangible was there, just not their bodies. Which is interesting, and it looked like they were circling some kind of a darkish, bubbledish kind of heated up spot in the rink, almost like something maybe came out of it. Maybe something emerged from the rink, because then, as it also says, there's kind of a dark stained trail that leads off into the carpeted area. So it does. So my initial thought is clearly the music does. The specific music keeps whatever this thing is contained in this area. That's per the rule. You do this, everything will be fine. You can do what you want. The moment that changes, it comes up, wreaks havoc, does what it wants. As to why all the people disappeared, not their clothes, maybe that's just a part of how it attacks, maybe how it feeds. But then we don't know where it went, what it looks like, anything else, what its intentions are. Maybe it's just going to go feed. I don't know. Does it go back when the music comes back? We don't know. We don't know anything else because there was nothing else told. But it just gives it that awesome air of mystery. And I'm just, God, it's so good. That's so good. Such a good little story. Oh man, it does make me think of just so many cool things. God, I love it. Excellent story. Absolutely excellent story. It does make me wonder if there's an SCP that's very similar to this. I'm sure some of you will be thinking of that as well. Let me know down in the comments below which SCP this sounds like, because I'm really curious. Because I might cover a couple of SCPs over the summer period, and yeah. Let me know where I should probably be looking. I might just go through order if I'm honest with you. It's just easiest. But SCP number 1 will be really hard to cover because it's got a lot of weird things to it. And it was classified and stuff. So I might start at number 2. We'll see. Anyway, not important. I'm Nate at Night. This has been awesome. I've had a great time, and I sure hope you have too. We will see you for whatever's next. Take care.
Thank you so much to our Patreon members and YouTube members for making all this content possible. You know who you are.